All right, here we go with part 2. Solving an equation or factoring a polynomial function. Sometimes no common factor, so we might try the factor theorem, right? Factor theorem. And the whole idea is we try values of x to see if we can get it to be equal to 0, because if it is, if we do find f at whatever equals 0, then we found a factor. And in this case, it doesn't look like it's going to work. I thought it was going to work, but it's not going to, right? 1 plus 2 minus 2 minus 4, that's minus 3. And so remember what this says, so x minus 1, not a factor. And we keep trying, right? And eventually we'll find out that, I had it right here, where was it? F at minus 2 works. So therefore, x plus 2 is a factor. Well, great. How do we find the other factors? Long division, right? So we go x plus 2, and we write our f at x, which is the function that we're trying to factor. X cubed plus 2x squared minus 2x minus 4. And then remember, the whole idea is multiplying by something so that when we subtract, it's gone. And x squared works often, and it does here. And in fact, this kind of works out strange, that it wipes out both things, and I'm left with 0. So what do? Well, I can call down two things, and what works now? Well, multiplying by minus 2 will work. So when I multiply by minus 2, I end up with minus 2x minus 4, and I get 0. This is weird with the no middle term, but that's because it canceled out there. So what we say then is, therefore, we've got x plus 2 times x squared minus 2 equals 0, right? Equals 0. That factored into this thing. So often this has to factor further, but I can see that this is true. I move the 2 over to the other side and take the square root. Positive and negative square root of 2, or positive and negative 1.41, right? And so then, therefore, there's our solutions. Solutions are blah, 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 blah. And that's the factor theorem, right? We use the factor theorem, find a factor, use long division, and then maybe we factor or use the quadratic formula to get the other factors. Now, I want to remind you of something, and maybe some of you saw this, I don't know, is that this actually factors by grouping, and I want to show you that. So and we see that this technique's a lot faster than using the factor theorem and long division. So if you can spot those grouping ones, folks, holy moly, that's a big time saver on an exam. The next one, notice that any of the techniques we use, grouping, factoring, factor theorem, the one side has to be equal to 0. So I'm hoping that your instincts tell you to move the 7x over to the other side, so we have this one side equal to 0, and then we have, oops, not 0 there, that was silly, oops, common factor of x, and then I have 2x squared minus 4x, well, that's in 4x squared there, so that's what I'm left with there. And then we see that we're going to get one solution here, x equals 0. And then this is a hard trinomial, right? So we could use whatever way that we choose, Aussie method or or decomposition or box method, however we like, or we could use the quadratic formula. And I'm not going to bother going through the quadratic formula again. This one, by the way, does not factor, so you do have to use the quadratic formula, and you get a couple of more solutions there. But since we saw the quadratic formula earlier, I'm not going to do it again. Let's just keep moving. Example 5 is a word problem. The profit of a company is given by blah, where P is the profit in thousands and T is the number of years since the company opened. When did the company make a profit? Well, that's when the profit is greater than 0, right? So we want to know and compare, when is this thing greater than 0? Well, we'll figure out when it's greater than 0. So first figure out when it's equal to 0. And so I'm going to factor. Find a common factor of negative 2t. That's t squared minus, well, that's 20. I blew that 20 in there. Minus 10 t plus 24. And I see one solution is t equals 0. But this also factors now. That's finally something that factors nicely. We almost cheer for the ones that do, because the formula is awful. And I get 3 solutions. I get t equals 0, t equals 6, t equals 4. But I don't know. The question is when? And who knows? Well, let's do a little sketch of the graph, right? If this is t, and this is the profit, I know that it's a break-even point at 0, a break-even point at 4, and a break-even point at 6. I also know that it's a cubic that has a negative leading coefficient, so it means it starts high and ends low. All of these are slash roots, and so it's going to look something like this, right? We weren't asked to sketch a graph, but geez, that makes it really easy to see that between years 4 and 6, the company has a profit. All right. And we saw lots of different applications of this, and hopefully you catch a couple more when you're studying for the test, maybe practice exam and so on. So that's it for that huge polynomial chapter. The last video is on geometry.